On October 23rd, a 911 call would reveal a crime scene so brutal that veteran investigators with decades of experience could not sleep for weeks. The dispatcher who took that call later said it was the most bone-chilling conversation of her 20-year career. What she heard in those frantic minutes would haunt an entire community forever. Have you ever walked past a house in your neighborhood and thought that family has it all figured out? You know the ones: perfectly manicured lawn, children who always say please and thank you, parents who seem to have their lives completely together. What if I told you that behind those perfect white picket fences, the most horrific family massacre in small-town history was waiting to unfold? Every year in America, approximately 20 to 30 family annihilator cases shock communities across the nation. These are not random acts of violence. These are calculated destructions of entire family units, often committed by someone the victims trusted completely. But what happened in Willow Ridge goes far beyond typical family violence. This case redefined what investigators thought they knew about domestic terror. The Holloway family looked like they stepped out of a magazine. Successful father, loving mother, 3 beautiful children living in a charming town where everyone knew everyone else. Victor Holloway owned the local hardware store. Lillian tended the most beautiful garden on Elm Street. Their children Clara, Elliot, and 9-year-old Maggie were the pride of Willow Ridge Elementary and High School. But appearances can be deadly. By the end of this video, you will understand why this case changed everything we thought we knew about family secrets. You will learn how financial pressure, psychological manipulation, and years of hidden abuse created the perfect storm for unthinkable violence. Most importantly, you will discover the warning signs that could have saved 5 innocent lives. If you are ready for a story that will change how you see your own neighbors, smash that like button right now. This case will challenge everything you believe about trust, family loyalty, and the masks people wear in public. The investigation that followed would reveal betrayals so shocking that even the most experienced detectives questioned their faith in human nature. What began as a welfare check on a quiet Tuesday morning became the most disturbing crime scene in the town's 150-year history. 5 family members dead, no forced entry, no robbery, just pure calculated destruction that left investigators asking one terrifying question: how well do you really know the people closest to you? Willow Ridge was the kind of town where everybody knew everybody else's business, or at least they thought they did. Nestled between rolling hills and dense woods, this community of just over 4,000 residents prided itself on being a safe haven from the chaos of modern life. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained homes, and neighbors who still brought casseroles when someone got sick. This was small-town America at its finest. At the heart of this idyllic community lived the Holloway family on Elm Street. To anyone driving past their 2-story colonial home, they represented everything good about small-town living. The lawn was always perfectly trimmed. The flower beds bloomed with seasonal colors. The American flag hung proudly from the front porch. But what happened inside those walls told a completely different story. Victor Holloway was 43 years old and owned Holloway Hardware, the only hardware store in town. For 15 years, he had been the go-to man for everything from fixing leaky pipes to building backyard decks. Customers loved his firm handshake and his ability to solve any home repair problem. At town council meetings, Victor spoke with authority about business development and community growth. He coached Little League Baseball and never missed a church service on Sunday morning. But the man who smiled and joked with customers all day became someone entirely different the moment he walked through his front door. Victor ruled his household with an iron fist disguised as loving discipline. Dinner was served at exactly 6 o'clock every evening. Children spoke only when spoken to. Homework was checked and graded like a military inspection. Any deviation from his rigid schedule resulted in consequences that the family learned never to discuss outside their home. Lillian Holloway had once been the most vibrant woman in Willow Ridge. High school classmates remembered her infectious laugh and her dreams of becoming a teacher. She had met Victor during her senior year, and their courtship seemed like a fairy tale romance. But 18 years of marriage had slowly drained the light from her eyes. The woman who once organized community theater productions now barely spoke above a whisper in public. Lillian found solace only in her garden, where she could nurture something beautiful without fear of criticism or correction. Neighbors often complimented her roses and asked for gardening advice, never noticing how she flinched when Victor called her name, or how quickly she excused herself when conversations lasted too long. Her transformation from confident young woman to anxious shadow happened so gradually that most people never realized it had occurred at all. 17-year-old Clara was the academic star of Willow Ridge High School, honor roll every semester, student council treasurer, college-bound with a full scholarship to study journalism. Teachers praised her dedication and maturity. Classmates envied her perfect grades and seemingly perfect life. What they could not see was how she wrote furiously in her diary every night, documenting her desperate plans to escape the suffocating expectations that crushed her spirit. 14-year-old Elliot was the family artist, though his father considered art a waste of time for a young man who should be learning practical skills. Elliot expressed himself through sketches and paintings, creating worlds where he could be free from constant judgment. His teachers noticed his talent, but at home his artwork was dismissed as childish distraction from more important responsibilities like maintaining perfect grades and helping at the hardware store every weekend. 9-year-old Maggie was the family's ray of sunshine, at least in public. Her blonde curls and bright smile made her the darling of every community event. She carried her stuffed rabbit, Mr. Buttons, everywhere and charmed adults with her polite manners and quick wit. But even Maggie had learned to read the tension in her home, developing an uncanny ability to sense when silence was required and when she needed to disappear into her room. The Holloways attended every community function. They sat in the third pew at First Baptist Church every Sunday. They hosted the annual neighborhood barbecue in their backyard. When other families faced difficulties, Victor and Lillian were always the first to offer help. Their children were polite, well-dressed, and academically successful. From the outside, they were the family everyone wanted to be. Comments question: have you ever felt like you had to be perfect for your family? Let me know below, because what you are about to discover will show you the devastating price of maintaining impossible standards. But perfection, as the residents of Willow Ridge would soon learn, was nothing more than a carefully constructed mask, hiding years of accumulated rage, resentment, and desperation that would soon explode into unthinkable violence. In the weeks leading up to the massacre that would shock Willow Ridge forever, subtle warning signs began appearing throughout the Holloway household. What seemed like minor inconveniences at first would later reveal themselves as the early tremors of an earthquake that was building beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life. It started with Scout, 9-year-old Maggie's golden retriever who had been her constant companion for 3 years. One Tuesday morning in early October, Scout simply vanished. The dog had never wandered beyond the backyard fence, never shown any inclination to run away. Maggie searched every corner of their property, calling his name until her voice went hoarse. She told her parents about seeing a strange man near the edge of the woods the night before, someone she had never seen in their neighborhood. Victor dismissed her concerns with typical authority. No stranger would dare cause trouble in Willow Ridge, he assured her. Scout would return when he got hungry enough. But Scout never came home, and Maggie's tears turned into sleepless nights clutching Mr. Buttons, wondering what had happened to her beloved companion. At Willow Ridge High School, Clara began finding handwritten notes stuffed into her locker. The messages were brief but chilling. Perfect families hide ugly secrets. Your father owes more than money. Pretty girls make easy targets. The handwriting was jagged, almost childlike, but the words carried a menace that made Clara's hands shake every time she opened her locker door. Clara was too afraid to tell her parents about the notes. She knew Victor would blame her for attracting unwanted attention, would question what she had done to bring this trouble to their family. Instead, she hid the notes in her bedroom, each threatening message adding to the weight of fear she carried alone. Elliot's artwork took a disturbing turn during this same period. His once cheerful drawings of landscapes and animals transformed into dark portraits of fractured faces and empty eyes. He drew figures standing in doorways, watching from shadows, always lurking just outside the frame. His art teacher, Mrs. Henderson, asked if everything was okay at home. Elliot simply shrugged and continued sketching, pouring his growing anxiety onto paper in ways he could never express in words. But the most significant crack in the Holloway foundation was Victor's mounting financial pressure. His hardware store, once the pride of Willow Ridge, was hemorrhaging money. Big box stores in the next town over had stolen most of his customers. Online shopping had eliminated the need for many people to visit local shops. Victor had borrowed heavily to keep the business afloat, taking loans from increasingly dangerous sources. Raymond Bell was not the kind of man who accepted late payments gracefully. As a loan shark operating throughout the county, Bell had built his reputation on swift and brutal collection methods. Victor owed him $12,000, and the deadline for repayment had passed weeks ago. The phone calls started coming at all hours. Men in expensive cars began parking across the street from the hardware store, watching and waiting. The breaking point came on a stormy October evening, when Victor discovered that Clara had been accepted to 3 different colleges, all requiring tuition money he did not have. The weight of his failures crashed down on him all at once. In a moment of pure rage, he swept his arm across the dining room table, shattering his grandmother's antique vase against the hardwood floor. The sound of breaking porcelain echoed through the house like a gunshot. Lillian gasped. The children froze in terror. Victor stood among the broken pieces, breathing heavily, his mask of control finally cracking along with the family heirloom. But here is where things get really disturbing. That shattered vase would not be the only thing broken in the Holloway house. What happened next would reveal that sometimes the most dangerous person in your life is the one you trust completely. The warning signs were everywhere. If you are seeing red flags in your own life, do not ignore them. Subscribe for more stories that could save your life, because what you are about to learn about the night of October 23rd will change everything you thought you knew about family loyalty and betrayal. October 23rd began like any other Tuesday in Willow Ridge, but by midnight, 5 members of the Holloway family would be dead, and a small town's innocence would be shattered forever. The evening started with an ominous weather forecast. Meteorologists warned of severe thunderstorms moving through the region, bringing heavy rain and dangerous winds. By 6 o'clock, dark clouds had gathered overhead, and the first drops of rain began tapping against the windows of the Holloway home on Elm Street. Inside the house, the family followed their usual rigid routine. Victor closed the hardware store at exactly 6 o'clock and arrived home to find Lillian preparing dinner in the kitchen. Clara was in her bedroom, working on college application essays that her father could not afford to support. Elliot sat in the basement, sketching by lamplight, his artwork growing darker with each stroke of his pencil. Little Maggie played quietly in the living room with Mr. Buttons, still hoping that Scout would somehow find his way home. At 7:15, the family gathered around the dining room table for what would be their final meal together. The conversation was tense. Victor announced that Clara would not be attending college in the fall because the family could not afford the tuition. Clara's dreams of studying journalism and escaping Willow Ridge crumbled in that moment. She excused herself from the table, claiming she felt sick, and retreated to her bedroom where she began writing furiously in her diary. By 8:30, the storm had intensified. Rain hammered against the windows, while thunder rolled across the sky like cannon fire. The power flickered several times, casting the house in momentary darkness before the lights returned. Lillian retreated to the kitchen to wash dishes, her hands trembling as she scrubbed each plate with mechanical precision. 9 o'clock found Victor in his study, staring at overdue bills and loan documents that represented his complete financial ruin. Raymond Bell had called 3 times that day, each conversation more threatening than the last. The final deadline for repayment was tomorrow, and Victor knew he had no way to satisfy his debt. In the basement, Elliot continued drawing, his latest sketch depicting a house consumed by flames with shadowy figures watching from the woods. Upstairs, Maggie had fallen asleep on the living room couch, Mr. Buttons tucked safely in her arms, while the storm raged outside. At 10:45, a car pulled into the driveway with its headlights turned off. The sound of the engine was masked by thunder and heavy rain. No one in the Holloway house noticed the visitor who walked silently to the back door. 11:15 marked the beginning of the end. The first gunshot echoed through the house, quickly followed by screams and the sounds of a violent struggle. The storm provided perfect cover for the sounds of terror that filled the Holloway home for the next 20 minutes. By midnight, the house had fallen completely silent except for the steady drumming of rain on the roof. The discovery came at 8:30 the next morning, when Mrs. Patterson, the elderly neighbor who lived across the street, noticed that the Holloway family had not collected their morning newspaper. This was unprecedented behavior for a family that maintained such rigid schedules. When no one answered repeated knocks at the front door, Mrs. Patterson called the police. Officer Daniel Martinez arrived at 8:52 and immediately noticed that the back door was standing wide open, rain soaking the kitchen floor. What he found inside would haunt him for the rest of his career. Victor Holloway lay slumped over his desk in the study, 2 bullet wounds in his chest. His financial papers were scattered across the floor, soaked with rainwater that had blown in through an open window. In the kitchen, Lillian was discovered beside the sink, her delicate hands showing clear signs of a desperate struggle before she succumbed to her injuries. Clara was found in her bedroom, still clutching a blood-stained note in her right hand. The paper was partially illegible, but investigators could make out fragments of words that hinted at betrayal and desperate secrets. Her college acceptance letters lay scattered on the floor around her body. The basement revealed Elliot surrounded by his dark artwork, as if his drawings had somehow predicted the violence that consumed his family. His final sketch, still wet with charcoal, showed 5 figures standing together before being engulfed by darkness. The most heartbreaking discovery was 9-year-old Maggie, found in the backyard near the edge of the woods where she had last seen Scout. She was still holding Mr. Buttons, her innocent face turned toward the storm clouds, as if she had been looking for help that never came. Each family member had been killed in a different location using different methods, suggesting a methodical approach that chilled investigators to their core. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of robbery, and no indication that the family had tried to flee. The killer had known exactly where to find each victim. The crime scene told a story of intimate betrayal and calculated violence that defied easy explanation. Someone with detailed knowledge of the Holloway family's routines and relationships had orchestrated their destruction with surgical precision. What investigators found next will make you question everything you think you know about this case, because the evidence they collected would reveal that the greatest danger to the Holloway family came from someone they trusted completely. Detective Marianne Cole had lived in Willow Ridge her entire life. She had graduated from the same high school as Clara Holloway, had bought garden supplies from Victor's hardware store for 15 years, and had even shared coffee with Lillian at community events. Walking through the blood-soaked rooms of the Holloway home was not just another case for Detective Cole, it was personal. At 42 years old, Cole had investigated dozens of violent crimes during her 20-year career with the Willow Ridge Police Department. But nothing had prepared her for the methodical destruction she witnessed on Elm Street. The killer had not acted in a moment of passion or rage. This was calculated, deliberate, and deeply personal. Cole began her investigation by studying the crime scene with forensic precision. Each room told a different part of the story. Victor's study revealed the motive: financial desperation. His desk drawers contained dozens of overdue bills, threatening letters from creditors, and loan agreements with increasingly dangerous terms. The hardware store was 3 months behind on rent. The family mortgage was in default. Victor owed money to people who collected debts with violence. The most damaging evidence came from a locked filing cabinet that Cole discovered hidden behind a false panel in Victor's desk. Inside were loan documents signed with Raymond Bell, a notorious loan shark operating throughout the county. Victor owed Bell $12,000, and the final payment deadline had passed 2 weeks before the murders. Phone records showed that Bell had called Victor 17 times in the final week of his life. Lillian's hidden journal provided even more disturbing revelations. Cole found the leather-bound diary concealed beneath loose floorboards in the guest bedroom. The entries, spanning 3 years, documented a woman living in constant fear. Lillian wrote about Victor's increasing anger, his financial stress, and her growing desperation to protect her children from their father's rage. One entry from September particularly caught Cole's attention. "I cannot live like this anymore. The children see everything, even when I try to hide it from them. Victor's debts are crushing us all. I have been thinking about calling someone, but who would believe me? Who would help us escape from this nightmare?" Clara's bedroom yielded crucial evidence about her secret relationship. Hidden beneath her mattress, Cole discovered dozens of text messages printed from her phone. The messages revealed that Clara had been dating Marcus Webb, a 20-year-old who worked at the garage outside town. Their relationship had been kept secret because Victor would never approve of his daughter dating someone he considered beneath their social status. More importantly, the messages showed that Clara had confided in Marcus about the anonymous threats she had been receiving. Marcus had urged her to tell the police, but Clara was too afraid of her father's reaction. The final message, sent just hours before the murders, read, "Something bad is going to happen tonight. I can feel it. If anything happens to me, look for the man who has been watching our house." Elliot's artwork provided the most chilling evidence of all. Cole spread his drawings across the police station conference table and studied them with growing alarm. The progression was clear. His early sketches showed a happy family, but over the past 6 months, his art had transformed into dark prophecies of violence and death. One drawing, completed just days before the murders, showed 5 figures standing in a house while a shadowy figure approached from outside. Another depicted a man with a gun standing over bodies scattered throughout different rooms. Elliot had somehow sensed the approaching danger and expressed it through his art in ways he could never communicate with words. The breakthrough came when Cole reviewed security camera footage from the gas station 3 blocks from the Holloway home. The timestamp showed 10:38 on the night of the murders, a dark sedan speeding away from the direction of Elm Street. The license plate was partially obscured by mud, but Cole could make out enough numbers to trace the vehicle. The car belonged to Travis Boone, a 35-year-old former employee of Holloway Hardware, who had been fired 6 months earlier after a heated argument with Victor over missing inventory and suspected theft. Boone had worked for Victor for 3 years before their relationship deteriorated into mutual hatred and accusations. When Cole arrived at Boone's trailer on the outskirts of town, she found him in his backyard burning papers and personal belongings. His hands were scratched and bruised. His clothes smelled of gunpowder. When confronted with the evidence, Boone initially denied any involvement in the murders. But after 6 hours of questioning, his story began to change. First, he admitted to being near the Holloway house that night. Then he acknowledged that he had spoken with someone inside the family about Victor's debts and violent temper. Finally, in a moment of exhaustion and desperation, Boone confessed to killing Victor Holloway in what he claimed was self-defense. However, Cole knew that Boone's confession did not explain the methodical murder of 4 innocent family members. Someone else had been involved in planning this massacre. Someone with intimate knowledge of the family's routines and relationships. Someone the victims trusted completely. The investigation took a turn no one saw coming. Share this video if you think you can solve a mystery before the detectives do, because what Detective Cole discovered next would reveal the most shocking betrayal in the history of Willow Ridge. Under mounting pressure and faced with overwhelming evidence, Travis Boone finally revealed the devastating truth that would forever change how the world viewed the Holloway family massacre. What came out of his confession was not a story of random violence or simple revenge, but a tale of desperate conspiracy that went catastrophically wrong. Lillian Holloway had contacted Travis Boone 3 weeks before the murders. She had found his phone number in Victor's old employee files and reached out to him in a moment of complete desperation. For months, she had been planning her escape from an increasingly dangerous marriage, but Victor's mounting debts and violent outbursts had accelerated her timeline. The original plan was shockingly simple. Boone would enter the house late at night and kill Victor while he worked alone in his study. Lillian would ensure that she and the children were elsewhere in the house, creating alibis while eliminating the man who had terrorized them for years. In exchange for this service, Lillian promised to pay Boone $5,000 from Victor's life insurance policy. But what Lillian did not know was that Travis Boone was struggling with severe mental health issues. He had been taking prescription medication for anxiety and depression, but had recently stopped his treatment due to lack of insurance coverage. On the night of October 23rd, Boone arrived at the Holloway home in an unstable psychological state, fueled by a dangerous combination of alcohol and unresolved rage against his former employer. The plan began to fall apart. The moment Boone entered the house through the back door that Lillian had left unlocked for him. Instead of finding Victor alone in his study, Boone encountered Clara in the kitchen getting a glass of water. Startled and panicked, he struck her before she could scream and alert the rest of the family. From that moment, Boone lost all control. His original mission to eliminate only Victor transformed into a frenzied rampage through the house. When Lillian discovered Clara's body and began screaming, Boone killed her to silence her cries. The sounds of violence woke Elliot in the basement, who ran upstairs to investigate and became the 3rd victim. Victor, hearing the commotion from his study, grabbed a baseball bat and confronted Boone in the hallway. The confrontation was brief but violent, ending with Victor's death from 2 gunshot wounds to the chest. Finally, Boone found 9-year-old Maggie hiding in the backyard, having fled through the patio door in terror. Unable to leave any witnesses alive, he completed the massacre that had never been part of the original plan. The psychological factors that drove Lillian to such extreme measures reveal the devastating impact of long-term domestic abuse. Years of financial stress, emotional manipulation, and psychological control had pushed her beyond the breaking point. She saw murder as her only escape from a marriage that was slowly destroying her and her children. Family annihilator cases often follow a similar pattern. Financial ruin, social humiliation, and the collapse of a carefully maintained public image drive individuals to commit unthinkable acts. But the Holloway case was different because the violence came from both inside and outside the family unit. Lillian's desperation combined with Boone's mental instability created a perfect storm of destruction. Financial pressure had indeed destroyed the Holloway family, but not in the way anyone expected. Victor's debts had driven Lillian to conspiracy and murder. His need to maintain their perfect reputation had prevented anyone from seeking help before it was too late. The weight of keeping up appearances while drowning in debt had poisoned every relationship in the household. The most heartbreaking aspect of the case was that Lillian believed she was protecting her children by eliminating their father. In her mind, Victor's death would free them from years of fear and give them a chance at a normal life. Instead, her desperate plan resulted in the deaths of everyone she was trying to save. The intimate betrayal that enabled this massacre was not just Boone's violence or Victor's abuse, but Lillian's tragic belief that murder was the only solution to her family's problems. Her decision to trust an unstable stranger with her family's lives demonstrated how completely domestic abuse had warped her judgment and destroyed her ability to seek help through legal means. The Holloway massacre left Willow Ridge forever changed. A community that had prided itself on safety and neighborly trust suddenly found itself questioning everything they thought they knew about the families living next door. The investigation's conclusion brought no sense of closure, only a haunting awareness that the greatest threats often come from within. Detective Marianne Cole struggled with the emotional weight of the case long after Travis Boone's arrest and conviction. The woman who had once felt completely safe in her hometown now installed security systems and checked locks multiple times each night. She sought professional counseling to process the trauma of investigating the murders of people she had known personally. Cole's experience highlighted a critical gap in law enforcement support systems. The Willow Ridge Police Department had no protocols for helping officers cope with cases involving personal connections to victims. Following the Holloway investigation, the department implemented mandatory counseling programs and peer support networks for officers dealing with traumatic cases. The abandoned Holloway house on Elm Street became a constant reminder of the tragedy. Real estate agents could not find buyers willing to live in a home where 5 people had been murdered. The property fell into disrepair, with boarded windows and overgrown gardens replacing the once pristine appearance that had fooled an entire community. Local teenagers dared each other to approach the empty house on Halloween night, while parents used it as a cautionary tale about the importance of communication and seeking help when families face serious problems. The house became a symbol of how quickly perfect appearances can crumble when foundational problems go unaddressed. The case forced Willow Ridge to confront uncomfortable truths about domestic abuse and financial stress within families. Community leaders organized workshops on recognizing warning signs of domestic violence and established new resources for families facing economic hardship. The local church created anonymous support groups where residents could discuss financial problems without fear of judgment. Mental health professionals used the Holloway case to educate communities about the warning signs that everyone had missed. Elliot's increasingly dark artwork should have prompted immediate intervention. Clara's withdrawn behavior and academic stress deserved closer attention. Lillian's transformation from vibrant community member to anxious recluse warranted concern from neighbors and friends. The tragedy revealed how social pressure to maintain perfect appearances can prevent families from seeking help when they need it most. Victor's pride had prevented him from acknowledging his financial failures. Lillian's fear had stopped her from reaching out to domestic violence resources. The children's loyalty to their family had kept them from confiding in teachers or friends who might have helped. Most importantly, the case demonstrated how multiple systems had failed the Holloway family. Schools missed signs of abuse and stress in the children. The business community ignored Victor's mounting debts and desperate behavior. Religious and social organizations failed to provide safe spaces for families in crisis. The broader implications of the Holloway massacre extended far beyond Willow Ridge. Domestic violence advocates used the case to highlight how financial stress can escalate abuse and push victims to make desperate decisions. Law enforcement agencies across the country studied the investigation to improve their own protocols for handling complex family violence cases. The tragedy served as a wake-up call for small communities everywhere. Perfect facades often hide devastating problems, and the failure to address those problems can lead to unthinkable consequences. The lesson was clear. Communities must create environments where families can seek help without shame, where warning signs are recognized and addressed, and where no one feels so trapped that violence seems like the only solution. The Holloway family massacre teaches us critical lessons that could prevent similar tragedies in communities across America. These are not just statistics or cautionary tales. They are life-saving insights that every person needs to understand. First, never ignore warning signs of abuse, even in families that appear successful and well-adjusted. Elliot's dark artwork, Clara's withdrawn behavior, and Lillian's transformation from confident to anxious were all red flags that the community overlooked. When someone you know begins showing signs of fear, isolation, or dramatic personality changes, those signals deserve attention and compassion, not dismissal. Financial pressure can destroy families in ways that go far beyond bankruptcy or foreclosure. When economic stress combines with domestic control and social pressure to maintain appearances, the results can be catastrophic. Victor's debts did not just threaten his business, they created the conditions for a desperate mother to believe that murder was her only escape route. Perfect facades often hide the darkest secrets. The families that seem to have everything together may be the ones struggling most desperately behind closed doors. Social media posts, community involvement, and public success can all be masks covering profound dysfunction and danger. Community support systems are absolutely crucial for preventing family violence. Willow Ridge had churches, schools, and social organizations, but none of them created safe spaces where the Holloway family could have sought help without fear of judgment or social consequences. Communities must actively work to identify struggling families and provide resources before crisis points are reached. Mental health resources save lives, both for victims and potential perpetrators. Travis Boone's untreated mental health issues turned a targeted killing into a family massacre. Lillian's desperation might have been addressed through counseling and domestic violence support services. Early intervention can prevent tragedies that destroy entire communities. The most important lesson from this case is that help is available, but only if people know how to access it and feel safe doing so. Domestic violence hotlines, financial counseling services, and mental health support can provide alternatives to the desperate measures that destroyed the Holloway family. This case changed how investigators approach family crimes, teaching law enforcement to look beyond obvious motives and consider the complex web of relationships and pressures that can lead to violence. It also highlighted the need for better support systems for both victims and the officers who investigate these traumatic cases. What is your biggest takeaway from the Holloway family massacre? Comment below and share what warning signs you think communities should watch for. If this story impacted you, hit subscribe. We dive deep into cases that teach us how to protect ourselves and our loved ones. Every story we cover contains lessons that could save lives. Speaking of families hiding deadly secrets, wait until you hear about the case where a family dinner became a crime scene and the killer was sitting at the table the entire time.